Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to pay our respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. Hey everyone, and welcome to Raising Parents, the Parenting Science Insights podcast, produced by Ellen Massell, the Life Management Science Labs. We are champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week, we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. I'm your host, Dina Sargeant. Let's get started. Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode. Now, parenting is one of the most rewarding yet challenging journeys. As caregivers, we constantly navigate the balance between nurturing our children's growth and setting boundaries along with that. So what exactly is positive discipline, and how does that shape the way that we raise our children? Our guest today has a different perspective on parenting that is gaining more attention today. He suggests, and I quote, that punishment doesn't change the tendency to engage in the punished behavior. Now, after 25 years of practicing clinical psychology, he is a retired professor and author, Dr. Michael Karson. Thank you so much for joining me, Michael.
Thank you for having me.
Now, with your work as a clinical psychologist, what was your role in the parent and child relationship that comes about?
Well, there's been quite a few. I've done a lot of couples therapy with people who are raising children, and so sometimes conflicts arise between them around child rearing. When you do work with individual patients, a lot of their imagination about who they are is shaped by their relationships with their parents. And then I spent a lot of time in the child welfare system, helping social workers decide which parents were unfit to raise their own children and which needed which different kinds of interventions to remedy past harms.
And now, what was the most common frustration parents and maybe sometimes children say when they're trying to pursue that interaction between either their parent or their child?
Well, I think there are a number of them. One of them is that things don't work as quickly as parents would like them to, and parents get frustrated. And another one is people often either don't have a partner in the enterprise of raising children, or else they're frustrated with their partner for one reason or another.
And I think it's really interesting as well when you do have two parents because they can end up raising the child in different ways, or one is a little bit more strict, one's a little bit more lenient. So there is that balance, trying to find that balance as to how the stability of the child is being raised with and punished with or disciplined with. And I think that's it's such an interesting aspect of watching parenting as well, because one parent may be a whole lot more lenient than the other, and the child can get away with more things with that parent than the other parent. So, no, it is a very interesting aspect of parenting that I can't wait to talk about even further.
Yeah, I think one of the issues there, besides what you just said about leniency, is that some parents also think parenting is like this amazingly important, sensitive enterprise, like brain surgery or I don't know what, something that is so important to get it exactly right. And then it aggravates and fuels conflicts with co-parents if they do it somewhat differently.
No, I think that's a very true point, and I think it's such a great introduction into our topic today. Before we discuss it further, I would love to get to know some of your recommendations as maybe some of your interests as well by playing a little icebreaker to hopefully get us warmed up. Now, to start off with, do you have a favorite book that you could share with us?
I have too many of them. The question itself makes me want to give an overview of my approach to parenting and to life. So my favorite book of all is George Eliot's Middlemarch. But the thing I love about that novel is that in her role as the narrator, she has so much wisdom and affection for all of her characters and all of her characters' foibles that it's a role model for me about how to think about children and also how to think about myself. B.F. Skinner's magnum opus, Science and Human Behavior, is just a brilliant book about why people behave as they do, which is where those ideas about punishment come from. But Skinner is able to address any human behavior through a scientific lens and understand it and think constructively about it. So there's the wise lens and the scientific lens. And then my wife wrote a comedic memoir that I love called The End of the World Notwithstanding. And she's able to look at, all sorts of life difficulties through the lens of humor. And I think that wisdom, humor, and science are really good lenses to use to look at life and to look at children through.
No, I think I really agree with that. And I think we definitely need humor in discussing these deep topics and discussing so many areas. Because if we didn't have humor, there's no way we'd be able to get through it and actually enjoy the work that we're doing or actually enjoy the amount of study that goes into it. Because humor is such a huge part of everyday life, and we sort of need that to get through. So I could not imagine doing anything without a little bit of humor added onto it with every part of the day. So no, I completely agree with that. How about when it comes to a movie? Do you have a movie that you could share with us that has recently become your favorite?
Well, I don't know if it's my favorite movie, but I recently saw Dream Scenario with Nicolas Cage. Um,
Ooh.
and it's really good movie on many levels. But the thing that it seems relevant to me is he's got this great family, this great marriage, and a job he loves and does well, but he ruins it all because he wants to be famous. And I think there's a parallel where in parenting, the perfect is often the enemy of the good.
Yes, that's very true. And I love the metaphor that sort of comes in with that film as well, is the fact that he's has everything, but he's still wanting more, is still not feeling fulfilled. And combining it with parenting, I love how you did that because that was a smooth transition into it as well. Because we're thinking about parenting and we have that idea of we want to be the best parents, but also at the same time, there's there's still so much of the best in the simplicity of it and still just being a parent and still just taking the time to enjoy each of the stages of development that your children are at and not really forcing them to be even better than that because the better does come later on. It does come with time and the amount of pressure that I think a lot of parents are under as well. I think that's such a great conversation to have.
Great.
Now, how about podcasts? Do you have any podcasts that you like listening to, or do you have a certain time that you like listening to them?
I'm pretty old, and I never made the transition from reading, so I mainly read.
Okay, perfect. No, I like that. I like that. I think podcasts are a fairly interesting aspect of it, but I definitely have a lot of people where they do say reading is still the best way of learning something. So no, I'm with you there. Now, I hope you're well and truly warmed up for the harder questions that we're going to be looking into today.
Sounds good.
So, I know that everyone has a very different idea as to what parenting is and what a parent is supposed to do. Either professionally or personally, do you have a definition for parenting that you could share with us?
Well, I have two definitions. One is simple. It's anything you do that affects your kids. And, you know, you're charged with helping them get from utero to adulthood and becoming a functional member of whatever culture you're in. The other definition is that parenting has become this thing, this vocation or this enterprise. And for most of human history, people didn't think about parenting as a thing. They thought about finding enough food or getting the chores done on the farm and so on. And it's really only since the 1950s that parenting has become a thing. And I think that's largely because, speaking for America anyway, and I think it's probably true in much of the industrialized world, that fewer and fewer people live on farms. And when people lived on farms, they raised their kids, they raised their cattle, they raised their sheep, they raised their chickens. And there wasn't a lot of angst about it. When they got off the farms, another thing that happened besides not having all these animals to raise was that people started doing it alone. They left their parents' places, and parents were on their own without grandparents sort of there to, pass on whatever knowledge they had. And then feminism came in around the same time, and I think one of the unfortunate effects of women so women got the idea that there was more to life than raising kids, and yet they were still just raising kids in the 50s and 60s. And so they wanted to sort of like bring their entrepreneurial and achievement energy to children instead of, doing something else and being kind of cool about raising kids. So then parenting became this thing that you were supposed to be excellent at instead of something you were supposed to just enjoy. So in my view, most of what determines what happens with kids is culture, biology, luck, and the personality of the people involved. And so parenting techniques play a very small part in that kind of outcome. But the literature available on parents and even podcasts like this one they're feeding this sense that there's a way to do it excellently and to do it better. And that can be kind of nerve-wracking. And I think it doesn't need to be that way.
I agree. I feel like there's so much advice that's out there for parents that they're not sure which advice to take. And the ones that they do take, there's a lot of challenges on the fact that it's the wrong kind of parenting. And a lot of the people also judge that way of parenting and be like, okay, this isn't how you're supposed to parent. But everyone has different ways of parenting, and whatever works for them does work, and whatever doesn't, then they find other ways to work about it. So it does sort of come up a little bit between biology, what's just sort of naturally in us as to be a parent, but also how the way that we were raised as kids as well, and how we sort of see our parents be parents, and whether or not we want to follow along those lines, or whether we want to do the complete opposite and do a 180 as to how we were raised as kids.
Yeah, and I do have some advice for parents, but the most successful parenting book ever was Dr. Spock, and partly because he wrote his book before anybody else had a competing book. But his two big pieces of advice that I remember when I read it, one was, you already know more than you think you do, so chill. And the other was, take off your watch before you give the baby a bath. And this is the kind of parenting advice I like. It's pretty obvious maybe, but yeah.
Yeah, it definitely adds the humor into it that we all need as parents as well.
Yeah.
Now, what do you think that expectant parents need to be aware of in their transition to being parents?
Well, you already know, like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, you get a lifeline. I mean, you're allowed to call your friends and your partner and your mom or whoever you trust and get input from them. Parenting for expected parents, I would want to say that parenting is a zero-sum game. When you don't have children and you decide you want to take a night for yourself, it's no sweat off anybody's back. When you have a kid, you're taking that time from your partner because somebody has to deal with the kid. So I would want to warn people that having a kid is a setup to start resenting each other. And there's a lot of things you can do to keep that resentment from building, but the main one is simply to recognize that it's a zero-sum game. Somebody has to watch the kid. I'd like people to know it's natural to resent your children. I mean, everybody talks still, even now, about how it's supposed to be, one blissful experience after another, and it's not. I'm all for it. It's a great way to spend a lot of time and to makes your life feel productive in many ways. But it's easy and natural to resent the kids. And a lot of the challenge of being a parent is finding something constructive to do with your aggressive or irritated feelings about your kids. And then the other advice I'd like to give is, this sums up parenting for me, is in the 1930s, they found out that if you put your baby to bed on their belly, they'll be smarter. And then in the 1980s, they found out if you put your baby to bed on their belly, they're more likely to die of SIDS. So to me, that's parenting in a nutshell. You put them on the back, you're making a mistake. You put them on the side, you're making a mistake. You put them on the belly, you're making a mistake. Just shrug it off and try to enjoy it.
That's true. That's pretty good advice, actually. I think whatever you're doing, you're going to be doing it wrong anyway, which is, I think, pretty much sums that up, is the fact that no matter what you do, it's going to not end well. It's going to be wrong. It's going to be the wrong way of doing it. It's not going to be how another parent of another child is going to be doing it, and that means it's going to be wrong.
Yeah, and then also I have one other piece of advice. Until the baby is born, many, many women have been perfect mothers. To be a perfect mother, all you have to do is eat spinach, don't smoke, and cut back on the drinking, and you're a perfect mother. I mean, because your body does the rest. So just get used to the idea that after the birth, it's going to be downhill in terms of your performance. You're not going to be perfect anymore.
No, that's definitely some advice for sure. Now, when it comes to positive discipline, there is that phrase that you sort of hear, that we hear quite often as sort of technology changes, social media sort of comes up, of what positive discipline is. So to you, how would you go ahead and define what positive discipline is?
So positive discipline is trying to change your child's behavior in the direction that fits your family's needs and your culture's expectations, without being excessively punitive. And excessively punitive means enough to scare the child or to hurt the child. So basically it means trying to find positive or constructive ways to shape a child's behavior besides hitting or threatening to hit or doing something else that scares them.
Okay. And one of the biggest advice, what are the potential benefits for children when parents sort of embrace that positive discipline technique?
Okay, but first, I want to answer that question. First, I want to say something about it, which is, who has time to do positive discipline? I mean, everybody's just trying to get through the day. And just don't ever forget that if you meet their biological needs, you feed them, you keep them safe, you give them a place to sleep and so on, you're doing pretty good. So, let's, take it with a grain of salt. But the main thing is, self-esteem is an interesting thing. To a behaviorist, self-esteem isn't the feeling you get when people tell you you're wonderful. That's become kind of a pop psychology definition of it. To a behaviorist, self-esteem is the feeling you have when you're good at something. So the way to develop self-esteem in children is to teach them how to do things. And to teach them how to do things like sleep through the night, go to bed on time, get their chores done, be polite, have table manners. These are all things you can teach your kids to do when they know how to do them. They have more self-esteem. So positive discipline is really a way to teach your kids how to do different things and get them self-esteem as opposed to negative discipline, which is you find the kids frustrating, and so you take it out by yelling at them or hitting them or doing something like that.
Hmm. So, how can parents really balance setting limits and boundaries with fostering that independence and autonomy with their children as well?
Yeah, I think that the main issue is to see it as teaching a skill. So instead of setting a boundary because I said so, although that may be a technique for setting a
Hmm.
boundary, the reason is you're trying to teach your child a skill. One of the important skills in our current world is going to bed on time. And if you go to bed on time, you'll get enough sleep, you'll do your job better, you'll be in a better mood with your friends, and you'll have a better life. So it's a skill. And if kids are raised without a bedtime, uh, then they won't have that skill. If kids are raised to follow the rules only because they're afraid of getting in trouble, they'll spend their lives looking for exceptions to following the rules. But if you learn how to follow the rules because it works in terms of collaborating and making the family work, you're more likely to follow the rules to make your neighborhood work.
So, there's a sense of the need to be an example to your children as to how the community is sort of working and how society is sort of wanting, rather than just sort of allowing them to free fall and figure out as adults how society is meant to function.
Yeah, I think that's very true.
Okay. No, because I think as parents as well, one of the main things that parents are is examples, are role models for growth, or role models as to how to be in society. So, is there a need for parents to also maybe be a part of their own community to sort of be that example for a child, be that view of a child as to how to function in society?
Yes, I think that's obvious, and part of that being a model for the child is also not being falsely mature or fake or whatever. But it's nice for kids to see their parents having fun and to see their parents having good friends and see their parents caring about how things go.
So you're saying that it's just as important to see a parent for a child to see a parent be a person as well as being a parent. So sort of having those friends, having those relationships, being a part, actually having fun and actually enjoying something rather than just being the role model of, oh, I'll tell you what to do and you have to do it like that.
Yes, of course, then within limits, your
Yeah.
child doesn't need to hear about your existential angst about the meaning of life, and they don't need to hear about your sex life. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. So how do you have those limits of trying to, because I know there's some parenting that say allow your child to also be your friend or allow them to see them as your friend. But I've had that experience with a parent for me, and I've seen the negatives that that can sort of have as to how much of a friend I suddenly became her confidant as a parent. And it was a really difficult thing for me to also be like, okay, I need a role model as to someone who's going to tell me right from wrong, but I also do want that relationship where I feel like I can tell her things kind of situation. So how do you find the boundary? What exactly is that boundary of, oh, I will share my life with you a little bit, but I'm not going to share everything?
yeah, I don't like the idea of parents and children being friends, although the word friends means so many different things in so many different contexts. But
Mhm.
to me, you should be close to your kids at first, and then less close as time goes by. It's really, I feel like parents are always a step behind. Just when you master the skills as a parent for raising a 2-year-old, you've got a 3-year-old. And just when you finally figure out how to raise an 11-year-old, you got a teenager. And I feel like, it's good to recognize that you're a step behind. Parents are always, uh, making an effort to, um, be close to their kids as they were a little while ago, but they're not that that's not what the kid needs now. You did that, and now they need to be less close. Um, so recognizing that you're a step behind, I think, is useful. I think the important thing is not to be friends, but to be collaborative. And you can be collaborative in a hierarchy without undermining the hierarchy. And then by that, I mean, if there was one thing besides bedtime's the main thing, but the next thing is parents want to engage their children in a feeling that they're doing this together, being a family, making a family, as opposed to the parent is strategizing on their own what to do with the kid. Now, of course, strategizing on your own worked perfectly for the first 4 or 5 months, but then the kid has to become part of the collaboration.
One thing with parenting is the idea of punishment. Like, I got punished quite a bit as a kid, put in timeout, not allowed, like having to go to bed, having to sit in my room and think, those kind of punishments. But there are some punishments that go a little bit too far. What are some alternatives that some parents can use for those punishments that do sort of get a bit more physical, a bit more verbal than it should do?
Okay, and then again, everybody knows this, but who has time? So, cut yourself some slack. But yeah, when you punish, this apparently is a law of nature, one of the few in psychology. But when you punish any organism, a pigeon, a rat, or a human, what it teaches them is not to do that around you. And then as soon as they sense you're not looking, they go off and do the behavior again. You've seen that with the kids from the strictest families go to college, and they're the ones who stay up all night drinking. Kids who have had more latitude are less likely to do that. If the only reason you don't drive 20 miles an hour over the speed limit is because you could get a ticket, it doesn't teach you to drive slower. It teaches you to look out for cops. And so punishment doesn't work. What we all want to do instead is reward positive behavior, especially behavior that competes with the problem behavior. So if the problem behavior is that the kid, starts insisting on buying candy at the grocery store while you're trying to do your shopping, you want to reward the kid for talking about their day or talking about the grocery items without demanding that they get candy. And so if they're being rewarded for being conversational, they can't be tantruming.
Okay. No, that makes a lot of sense. I think when you said the grocery store, it reminded me of a moment that my mom loves to bring up every single time. And when we talk about punishment, is the fact that when I did throw tantrums, one of the ways that she used to say no is the fact that she'd let me know before we walk in to the store that, okay, we're gonna go to here. If you We'll see how we go, and if we're able to get you something, we'll get you something. If we're not, then we're not going to be able to get you, but we'll try to get you another time.
Yeah, great.
There was one moment where I did throw a tantrum, and she literally gave the trolley full of groceries over to the cashier and was like, "We'll be back later, but we need to go home now." Like, my punishment was pretty much we go home completely. There was no talking through it. There was no her trying to get me to stop screaming. It was like, "No, we're going home." And that was the way that she dealt with pretty much my sister and I childhood tantrums that sort of came about, to a point where we didn't throw anything anymore. And we just knew that the minute that we did, we'd have to go home. So none of us would get to enjoy anything.
That's super.
Yeah. Yeah, it does come out.
There are parents who absolutely have to get the shopping done right now. And so the kid has all this extra power. If they throw a tantrum, the parent can't afford to go home right then. Sometimes it works then for the parent to bring the kid to the store when they don't have to get the shopping done. And then they could practice looking at candy and not demanding it, or they can practice looking at certain kinds of cereal and not demanding it. But that's a talented thing. That's the secret behind 1, 2, 3 magic, is it's a great technique, but it's really a technique for the parent. What it teaches the kid is to listen to me when I talk, and especially when I say one, then you'll listen. Your mom is teaching you to do the same thing. She's teaching you to listen to her.
Mhm. No, that's
The
very
main,
true.
the main thing that teaches children not to listen to their parents is when the parents set a limit and then don't abide by it themselves. So they say,
Yeah.
if you don't stop that right now, we're going home. And they don't stop, but the parent can't go home because they got the cart filled with all the food they need to bring home to feed the
Yeah.
family.
It's like the empty threats that sort of come in as well, where the child exactly knows the fact that it's all just talk and they'll actually give in soon. Or they'll give in if you keep going a little bit more, the child can easily get whatever they want.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So there is a question that I did want to pose out for a lot of parents who are sort of going through their own struggles as well when it comes to parenting. And if a parent sort of struggles with anxiety a little bit more, sometimes it's can affect how you discipline the child. Are there any tips for managing anxiety while still being an effective parent?
Yeah. Sometimes anxiety is a psychological problem that needs to be addressed in therapy, but typically anxiety can be thought of as a few things. One way to think of anxiety is it's fear when you don't know exactly what it is you're afraid of. So you hear, yeah. So then if you can specify what it is you're afraid of happening, it'll convert from anxiety to fear, and then you can deal with fear by, shining a light on it, seeing how likely it is, talking it over with your friends, and so on. Skinner says anxiety is the feeling we have when we don't know what to do. In parenting, I mean, in other areas of life, the answer to that is get better at it. In parenting, I think maybe the answer is stop thinking there's something to do and, congratulate yourself for, being relatively in a good mood and keeping the family occupied and cheerful and engaged. And then lastly, the treatment for many anxieties is exposure. If you're afraid of dogs, you hang around dogs and you get used to it. Exposure is a fancy way of saying getting used to it. One of the main things that drives parents who spoil their children, and that's my whole generation, spoiled our children. But one of the things that drives them is that they're anxious when their kids are unhappy, especially when the baby's crying or some kid is wailing or about something. And really the best thing to do is to expose yourself to it, both with your kid and with other people's kids, until it just doesn't get under your skin. Now that's saying a lot because babies have evolved for, a billion years to have a cry that gets under your skin. So it's specifically designed to do that. But if you hear babies crying enough, so I think parents, for that reason, are always less anxious about kid number 5 than they are about kid number 1, because the crying doesn't get to them. They know that kids cry, and it doesn't mean it's a bad thing. Yeah.
So, when it comes to those real life situations, if a parent does have anxiety, a lot of the anxiety does sort of come out when the kid is screaming in public as well. Like, that's one of the things that makes a lot of parents anxious. How do you sort of manage that as well as a sort of a real life example?
Okay, well, don't take your kids to the kinds of restaurants where people are paying so much that they don't expect to have a crying kid. And then you won't get yourself into that situation. Be aware that in many situations, there are places filled with parents who are on your side. So don't be so quick to feel terrible about it. And then also acknowledge that you're going to be in some situation where your kid has the better of you. And you need to leave those situations so that the kid doesn't learn that they're bigger than you are or more powerful than you are. And then lastly, you need a partner. You need somebody, who says to you, not, well, you should have handled that better. You need someone who says to you, life's tough. So if you didn't get dealt a partner in the baby lottery, then, I feel like it's really a good idea to find, if you're a single parent, go find another single parent and support each other.
No, I think that's such a great piece of advice because I think we sort of get so focused in, and I know a lot of my friends who have young kids, whenever they go and sit in a cafe or they go sit in a restaurant, there's always that tantrum that that my friend is just staring at the child like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to manage this in public, especially because there are 1,000 of other people watching, 1,000 other people also trying. And you have that realization that, oh, I know there are so many other people out there who are watching what's happening and being like, you're a bad parent because you're making your child cry, you're a bad parent. And you get judged really easily. I actually didn't know how easily you get judged until I went out with my friend and her kids. We went for breakfast at a cafe and the kid was throwing a tantrum, didn't want to eat what we got her. And she was so embarrassed. And I'm just staring at the amount of people that were watching around. And it's so sad to see that there are people just sitting there judging it, sitting there not really being like, oh, sympathizing with the parent, but more like judging the fact that it's crying.
Well, I agree, and that's a bad thing, but it's also people paid to have breakfast, and they don't want to have breakfast with a yelling kid. So I
Yeah.
feel like if you're going to take a kid to any kind of restaurant, you got to be ready to drop what you're doing and take the kid outside while other people enjoy their meal, which is
Mhm.
the equivalent of a timeout or going to your room.
That's true. No, I
So,
think that is a true point.
so if you're going to put yourself in situations where the kid has that kind of power, I think you have to do the equivalent of what I was saying about the grocery store, which is you're going to have to do some trial runs. Go to a donut shop and don't order anything, and let the kid realize that. Find out that they don't get their way if just because they're yelling. On the other hand, you can also bring something the kid does like, whether it's peanut butter or something, and always have it available if
Yeah.
you're trying to keep peace. Yeah.
No, that's a good point. Now, consistency is key, and I think we know that when it comes to parenting. How do you consistently how can parents ensure consistency in their application of positive discipline, especially when dealing with the challenging behavior in real life situations?
Okay, so this will be the I won't say this again, but give yourself a break. You're not going to be consistent. Just try to do the best you can. But it helps to know that every time you're inconsistent, you make it like 10 or 20 more times you're going to have to be consistent. So when you say to the kid, go to your room, you can't come out until you've been quiet for 5 minutes, and then you go in and check them, you're going to have to now do it over and over and over again. So, and then don't say things you can't do. Otherwise, you're also being inconsistent. But I think when you really take in how psychology works, and that is simply that if you're inconsistent once, it's going to take 20 more consistencies to get there. It'll help you stick with it. And then you have to have somebody who's holding your hand, and is patting your shoulder and saying, we can do this. I don't think, there's a point with infants where you want to let them cry for 10 minutes so that they can go to sleep. And parents have a really hard time with that. But if you have somebody with you during that 10 minutes, and, I don't know what you're doing, you're knocking back shots or you're patting each other on the head, you're wearing ear headphones, I don't know what, but somebody with you, it can really help you stay consistent.
Now, that's actually some really great piece of advice, especially when it comes to the consistency aspect to it and really putting that in terms of, okay, I can restart it again if I'm not really keeping it up. And I just have to remember to restart rather than being like, okay, I'm going back into my old ways again because it's just the easiest way to do it. And when it comes to positive discipline as well, there's that idea of you need to sort of give yourself that space to remember to small as well. You can't really go and jump into, I'm going to give this 100% because the consistency part is not going to really work really well. So there is that space where you sort of do need to give that time to build up on something rather than just start from 100% and being like, I'm going to do all of this and do it from the beginning and make sure I have time for that, because it will work for like a week or so, and then real life happens and then your situation changes and you're back to doing the same thing that you've always been doing.
Right. It's also useful to get a load of who you are as a parent. I mean, are your tendencies toward spoiling your kids, abusing your kids, or neglecting your kids? Most people who listen to podcasts are spoilers. I mean, neglectful parents see that something's wrong, but then they don't pay attention to it because they're they're neglectful. And parents who deal with their aggression, irritation with kids by being mean to them, see there's something wrong and it makes them angry and they get mean. They don't go buy a parenting book. But the spoilers really like, you feel like your kid's not doing as well as you would wish. And so you think it's your fault, and if only you gave them more, read more books, and stressed yourself more, then finally that might do it. But if your tendency is to spoil kids, and that's the same as saying that you can't stand seeing them unhappy, then I think it can help to, diagnose yourself as a spoiler, and then pay attention to your kids and let them be unhappy. I've often said that if your kids never had a bruise, you're overprotective. So, for the spoilers of the world, it's like when you buy insurance. You want to buy insurance against disaster, not against, mishaps. And you want to protect your kids from disasters, not from, mishaps of childhood. So, it can help to have a sense of what journey you in particular are on, given your predilections with respect to parenting.
Mhm. That's perfect. Now, this leads us really well into the practice and habit section of the show. Now, this is a practice that you recommend for some parents, and I know we've already gone through some recommendations, but I'd love to get to know what you recommend for parents to build their own resilience to challenging situations with their child.
Yeah, the main one is exposure. Notice that people are unhappy and then they're happy. It's not a reflection on you. And then I can't emphasize enough how important bedtime is to raising kids and having a happy family. If you know that the little imps are going to disappear at exactly 7:30, you can be cheerful, wise, humorous, benign, and thoughtful until 7:29 and a half, because you know when the bell goes off, you can stop. Whereas if you haven't imposed a bedtime, if you haven't taught your children to go to bed at a specific time, then your frustrations get the better of you, and you feel like you're not resilient. So if you're going to put energy and parenting into anything, I put it into having a bedtime, and that'll help you stay cheerful right up until the little darlings go to bed.
I love the little darlings phrase.
And then you get the whole evening to yourself. You don't have to worry about
That's
them
true.
popping up because you've taught them how to go to bed on time and how to sleep through the night.
So that's the first thing that you would suggest to a lot of parents to get set into a bedtime routine first.
Yes. I just think it makes everybody happy, or makes the kid happy, because they can go to their bed and have their thoughts and get plenty of sleep, and it makes the parents happy.
They get to step away from being a parent for the night, which is nice.
Yes, but it takes aggression. You have to be in control of your own aggression to develop the skills to teach your children how to go to bed.
Mm-hmm. Okay. No, that's some great advice. And I think a lot of parents are like, now trying to instill a bedtime. I think bedtime is one of the hardest things, especially as they get to school ages or they get to high school ages. That idea of bedtime sort of becomes a little bit more difficult with homework that sort of gets involved and things like that. But no, I think bedtime is definitely something that I really wish still imposed on me as an adult, because me and sleep is still not things that I have figured out yet as an adult. But yeah, it's definitely something that I really do love about my childhood, is the fact that bedtime was very much a set routine of having a bath and going to bed, and that was exactly how we'd end every night.
Yeah, it's nice.
Perfect. Okay, well, this leads us really well into the open mic section of the show. Now, this is the part where you get to share exactly what you're passionate about. It doesn't have to be related to what we're talking about today, or it's a space that you can also use to promote any aspect of your work that you'd like to. And I think we did have a conversation about what you would talk about a little bit earlier. So in the last minute or so, I'd love to give you the floor and share what's on your mind with us today.
Well, one thing I'm passionate about is self-acceptance. And that doesn't mean self-congratulation. It means feeling like you're the main character of your life, but not the main character of all of human history. And I think it's good to teach kids that they're the main character of their life, but they're not even the main character of their own family. So I feel like that kind of cherishing without overblowing it is a really good way to relate to ourselves and to relate to our children. And that's, to me, what one of the main issues in therapy is to learn that. Right now, I mainly do only doing couples therapy online. And I do like the idea of coordinating two main characters. So for couples to flourish, neither one of them can be the main character in the marriage or the relationship. They have to learn how to coordinate with each other. And if you can do that, you'll have learned a lot of the skills that are needed to coordinate you and your children being main characters. So right now, my main open mic passion is helping couples relate to each other in a way that's celebratory and positive.
That sounds really interesting. So it's mainly couples are pretty much co-hosts of their own podcast, pretty much.
Yes, exactly.
They both share that conversation, and they each have different topics each time.
And they're also the audience.
Yes. Yep. They're also the worst critic and the best critic.
Exactly. Yes.
No, that's perfect. So if anyone would like to maybe get to know your work a little bit more, or maybe find out a little bit more about the couples therapy that you offer, is there a link that I can share with them?
Yes, michaelkarson.com. Links to my online practice. And it also, I've been blogging for Psychology Today for over 10 years. So about 300 blog posts. Many of them are about parenting. Many are about being in a couple and true love and resolving conflicts.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Michael, for joining me on the show today. I love talking about this. I think parenting, especially when it comes to the fact that being a good enough parent is a perfect parent, I think that's exactly what we need to promote in everyday life, because we're so focused on the idea of being a perfect parent that we forget that as long as the kid is living and as long as the kid is not emotionally damaged in any way, then I think we're doing a good job.
Yes, totally agree.
Okay, perfect. I love that we're on the same wavelength. That makes it so much easier. Now, thank you again, Michael, for joining me on the show. I love having you on, and I love talking about this. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
And I hope you guys learned as much as I did when it comes to positive discipline. And the good enough parent is exactly that, good enough. I'll see you all in the next episode. You've been listening to Raising Parents, the Parenting Science Insights podcast, produced by the Parenting Science Labs, a division of LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. More episodes are available from 10 life management perspectives and can be found by searching LMSL on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and other podcasting apps available on your devices. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider rating our show, sharing it, and subscribing to our channel. as it helps other people find it so that we can grow and bring you more quality resources. More of our work can be found on our website at pa.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Dina Sargeant. Thanks for tuning in.